Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont delivered a fiery speech on the Senate floor on Tuesday, laying out his new 12-point plan for rebuilding the middle class.
The question of our time is whether or not we are prepared to take on the enormous economic and political power of the billionaire class, or do we continue to slide into economic and political oligarchy.
And 2 days later, Sanders was out on the street joining fast food and federal contract workers, calling for higher wages and union protections.
We are living in a country where the people on top have never had it so good. And what we are saying today to the head of McDonald's and to the United States government is that the wealthy cannot have it all.
That's right.
Working people deserve a fair shake.
It's no secret by now that Bernie Sanders is considering running for president from the left. As the New Yorker's John Cassidy wrote this week, Sanders is putting together his progressive manifesto, trying to pull Democrats to his side of the political spectrum on economic issues like financial regulation, trade, and health care. I talked to Bernie Sanders on Friday about his efforts to make his party, or the party he may eventually join, more progressive. Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you for joining us. So you laid out on the Senate floor recently a 12-point economic agenda, and I think people can read that as your agenda, sort of your wish list for the next Congress over the next 2 years, and I think other people can look at that and say that's potentially a platform for a presidential candidacy. So I want to talk to you about both. Let's start with the Congress that's going to be seated in January for the next 2 years. This 12-point agenda you laid out, is there anything in there specifically, given that you have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and Obama obviously still in the White House, is there anything in there specifically that you believe can and will be passed in the next 2 years?
The answer is yes. I think if the president remains strong and if we can rally the American people to demand that Congress start working on the disappearing middle class and the growing gap between the rich and the poor, I think we can implement some important policies. Right now, the fastest way to create the millions of jobs we desperately need is by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, bridges, water systems, rail, etc. If we invested $1 trillion over a period of years, we can create 13 million jobs.
But do you think that I'm sorry, Senator, do you think that level of investment, given everything we've seen from the Republican House over the last 4 years, do you think that level of investment or anything approaching it is realistic to come out of a Republican Congress?
Well, you're right. I don't think we will get as much as I want or as much as we need. On the other hand, you have conservatives like Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma, who happens to be the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, will be chairman of it, who does believe in infrastructure, as well as other Republican senators, governors, and members of the House. So I do hope, with the president's support, that we can begin substantially investing in infrastructure and creating jobs. Other area, I think the minimum wage at $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. I think it's got to be raised over a period of time to $15 an hour. But you have people like Mitt Romney and other Republicans talking about raising the minimum wage. You had 4 conservative states in the last election voting to raise the minimum wage. Do I think the Republicans are smart enough to know that this is an issue they should be able to move on? I do. So I hope we can make some progress there as well.
Now, as I said, it's something people would look at this and say, Bernie Sanders has said he's exploring a bid for president. If he runs for president, this pretty clearly an economic platform to run on for president. I think one of the things people look at here is they say, well, Hillary Clinton, obviously the big front runner everybody sort of acknowledges in the Democratic side right now. When you look at the principles that you laid out, you look at these 12 steps that you laid out here, do you think realistically, do you believe Hillary Clinton is in line with you on them, or are there differences that you see with her potentially?
Well, Steve, my suggestion is ask Hillary Clinton about her views on this. I can't speak for Hillary Clinton. What I do know is that virtually every one of these issues, infrastructure, raising the minimum wage, pay equity, transforming our energy system, demanding and passing legislation to ask the wealthiest people and largest corporations in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes. You know what? These are very, very popular issues. They go across the political spectrum. The American people know that there's something wrong when the middle class is disappearing and 95% of all new income today goes 1%. So that is an important set of principles that any serious candidate should run on.
I guess what I wonder about is when I listen to Democrats, and this would include Hillary Clinton, and I know she hasn't said too much specifically. I think that's sort of by design over the last few months. But when I listen to her speak sort of in more broad terms of principle, I hear what you just said. I pay equity, closing the gap between rich and poor in this country, limiting economic inequality. I hear that from her. I hear that from just about every big-name Democrat out there. So I wonder, it seems that on the core principles, I don't hear much difference between you and most other Democrats in Washington. So where are the differences that would encourage you to run for president?
Really? I have spent my entire political career taking on every special interest. It's one thing for somebody to talk about, well, we have to expand the middle class. We have to create jobs. Everybody says that, including Republicans. I think when you have to look at the specifics of the program that people are outlining, I will be outlining a very specific program within the next.
Well, Senator, that's what I'm asking you there, though. In terms of when you get beyond the broad strokes rhetoric here,
right.
I agree with you. I mean, you hear that from everybody. So I'm saying when you look at the Democratic Party and the leaders of the Democratic Party, when you get beyond the broad stuff, where are they falling short specifically?
Well, we need, for example, we are losing $100 billion every single year because corporations are stashing their money, their profits in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda and other tax havens. I'm going to bring forward and have brought forward legislation to end that absurd practice. I happen to believe that the United States should not be the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people through a national health care program. I support a single-payer national health care program. I happen to believe that our current trade policies, NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, are a disaster, which have lost us millions of jobs in this country as companies shut down here and go abroad to low-wage countries. I want to change fundamentally our trade policies so that companies reinvest in America, not in China. Are those issues you're hearing from a whole lot of folks?
Let me ask you this. If you do go ahead and run for president, if you do run in the Democratic primaries, it will require you to change your party registration and become a Democrat. That's something you have not been throughout your political career. Are you comfortable potentially making that step?
Well, that's an issue I'm talking. I don't know whether I'm going to run or not. We are exploring that. Look, Steve, if you run a campaign based on the principles that I believe in, which is that ultimately we don't make change in this country unless we take on the billionaire class, which now has so much economic and political power. In order to do that, you need to run an unprecedented grassroots campaign. Are there millions of people who are prepared to stand up and work really, really hard getting involved in that kind of campaign? You know what? You don't know that. I don't know that. I have got to determine that before I make a decision. What you're asking me also is, I am the longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. If you do pursue a campaign, if I do pursue a campaign, do you do it within the structure of the Democratic Party? Or do you do it outside of the party? That's a very difficult question. I'm also trying to get some understanding of where people are coming from on that. There are positives and negatives of either approach.
And where at this point, in terms of your decision, do you have a sense when you'll have a decision made?
I'll make it at the appropriate time. I think the people of this country are not necessarily sympathetic to never-ending campaigns. So I think we have some time to do it. On the other hand, obviously, there's a point, if you're going to go forward, where you're going to have to make a decision.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders, independent, at least for now, from Vermont. Appreciate you taking the time this morning. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, Bernie Sanders, we'll keep an eye out on what he does. We have just a few extra seconds.